Quick disclaimer, first of all, excuse the fact that my office is messy, and if there's any weird noise in the background, just know that those things are because I have 2 dogs now, so that is super exciting. Welcome to the family, Harlow. Today's video is gonna sound a little weird. This is a book that I do highly recommend to everyone, and I do think everyone should read, but at the same time, there are a lot of things that I really dislike about it, and there are a lot of places that I have some really serious issues with it. So I feel bad. This was one of the first books that I legitimately thought I was just going to universally love, and I was wrong about that. I went into this book just fully prepared to make a review video where I give it a glowing review and point out all the passages where I think there's information that you guys absolutely need to learn from this book, and I am going to be doing a little bit of that because there is a lot of important information in here, but unfortunately that's going to come with many heaping grains of salt. I don't need any more salt in my life. I've been bloated for weeks. Maybe instead of salt we'll use some spice instead. Maybe some garlic powder, a little oregano, a little imitation oregano rolled up all cozy, you know what I'm saying? So this is probably going to be one of the most mixed book reviews of all time on my channel, which is why it's taken me so long to actually get this review out. I was originally trying to get this video out back in June, if you guys can believe that. So without further ado, let's dive into an in-depth literary analysis, book discussion style video of the newest book in the anti-multi-level marketing canon, a memoir by one of the former top leaders of Rodan and Fields who left the company and is now speaking out against their predatory practices. Today we'll be reviewing Emily Lynn Paulson's 2023 book, Hey Hun, Sales, Sisterhood, Supremacy, and the Other Lies Behind Multi-Level Marketing.
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effing.
Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who.
What's up, my fellow small business supporters? I'm Savvy. Welcome back to Savvy Rates Books. This is the channel where we talk about books and business, and today we are going to have another book review for you guys. But before we get too deep into that, please don't forget to subscribe because I put out new videos like this every week. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so that you'll be notified when new videos come out. This video does not have a sponsor, but it was brought to you by my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much to everyone who supports this channel on Patreon. I really appreciate it. Names are up on the screen. Take a look in the description below if you want to see my Patreon supporters who contribute $5 a month and up. As a reward I offer at that tier is to get to link your own small business, social media page, whatever you want to promote in the description below, so you can take a look at that as well. In addition, just a few days ago, my merch brand, Hipster Unicorn Fashion, had our fall launch where we finally released beanies. I know everyone's wanted beanies and has been excited for that, and I also finally released some workout tanks, which has been really exciting. So go ahead and check out hipsterunicorn.myshopify.com, which is linked in the description below, for our fall collection, which includes beanies, workout tanks, and other fun fall outfits, including these new sneakers that I designed that have these little coffee cups all over them. I've been enjoying wearing them. Just a lot of fun, cozy fall stuff featuring my original art if that's something you're interested in. Now that I'm done promoting myself and being a boss babe, let's read a book all about life as a boss babe. So as a quick overview, I would say that this book is a good companion to read in addition to a book like Ponzi-nomics by Robert Fitzpatrick. I wouldn't just read this one, I would read both of them. And that's because this book kind of provides the anecdotal storytelling, which complements the facts and data and pure analysis of that book as well, although this book does have a lot of good facts and data in it also. I think it's most impactful to us as humans to have both personal stories of people that we can emotionally connect with that stick in our memories, as well as having those facts and those hard statistics. When we can combine those things, you got the ethos, pathos, and logos. When you combine those things, that's when you have the strongest argument possible to make against someone. Now, there were times when reading this book that I was confused who the audience was.
So I am confusion.
So basically, the summary of this book is very brief. It says, equally entertaining and smart, Paulson's first-person accounts, acerbic wit, and biting commentary will leave you with a new perspective on those hey hun messages flooding your inbox. So it's a story of her time selling in an MLM, why she chose to leave, what she learned along the way, that type of thing. Now, I was kind of confused who the intended audience of this book was supposed to be. So this book is for people who have already left MLMs. A lot of it really feels like it's preaching to the choir. It's a lot of information that a lot of people in the anti-MLM movement already know. If it's for people who are currently in MLMs and it's providing information to help convince them to leave, I felt that there wasn't really enough widespread storytelling, enough showing how it makes a global impact, and too much of just one person's testimony, one individual story to truly convince them. If this book is for people who are in the anti-MLM movement and are trying to arm themselves with further facts and stories to help the movement overall and to spread to other people, I can see some benefit there, which is again why I do recommend this book, but I also have some hesitations on certain parts of the book because there are just parts of this book that came off as really misogynistic and stereotyped women in a lot of ways that didn't resonate with me and often felt more harmful than true. And we're going to get into the details of all of those. So that's all just to say that I do highly recommend this book, but I recommend reading it critically and reading it with some skepticism because there are some parts to this that feel kind of sus. So we're going to go through this book. We're going to do a full literary analysis of everything going on in here. Starting with the introduction, we're going to start on page Roman numeral 15. She says, one of my favorite quotes from Roberta Blevins, host of the Life After MLM podcast and star of the documentary series Lula Rich, is, everyone in an MLM is a victim and a perpetrator. And I believe that. I now view people in MLMs as victims and perpetrators simultaneously, whether they want to see it that way or not. I absolutely agree with this statement, and I think this statement serves as a fantastic thesis for the book as a whole. I like that this book as a work of nonfiction does have a clearly and easily identifiable thesis, which guides the storytelling in a way that kind of keeps everything focused. Now, I am a little bit biased here because I also love the Life After MLM podcast, and Roberta, who hosts it, is one of my best friends, but I'm also going to recommend that in addition to this book, that everyone also listen to the episode of the Life After MLM podcast where Roberta interviews Emily about her process of writing this book. The interview is just fascinating, and it also features one of my questions during the Q&A, which is fun. But this is all to say that I agree with both Emily and Roberta here. MLMs abuse and victimize their own representatives while also encouraging them to perpetuate that same harm onto other representatives, usually women, as well. I'm glad that Emily frames the book this way from the beginning because we know we're in for a nuanced story, one that doesn't have pure heroes or pure villains, but rather people who have the capacity to both do amazing good things for the world, but also to enact undue harm on one another. And that is a capacity that all of us have. This thesis serves as a reminder that none of us are immune from the pressures of MLM companies, and that once we're suckered into one, we'll become both the victim and the one who perpetuates the cycle of abuse. It shows just how insidious MLMs are, turning their own representatives into people worthy of self-loathing. I was fully 100% on board with this thesis, and overall, I thought this book's introduction was really good. It suggested that the book had a lot of promise to delve into the complexities of MLM companies and how they harm everyday people, and how systemic classism, only bolstered by the American free market individualist ideal, not only allows these companies to continue, but encourages and incentivizes their survival. So with that in mind, let's go into chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called The Best Fake Friends You'll Ever Have. We are on page 5 right now. On page 5, she says, women don't have a village. We are alone. Even if we are married or partnered, even if we have friends, the day-to-day tasks fall completely on our shoulders. We take time off from our jobs while our partners go back to work, maybe take a little maternity leave, or assume more of the household duties in lieu of working outside the home. Yet days are stretched out, the calendar is empty, and we're busier than ever trying to keep a human alive. Despite this being the norm for every woman who has a baby, most of us do it by ourselves. Studies show that 90% of new moms consider themselves lonely and 54% consider themselves friendless. My main criticism of these lines in the book is, why doesn't it explore the why? This book has promised me an examination of how MLMs bake themselves into our already existing systems of misogyny, and I, as the reader, as someone who wants to learn, I need an explanation of how that unfolds. And I'm going to give my own theory on why that happens later in this video. Spoiler alert, it's capitalism, but I would hope that a nonfiction book targeted at all readers, not just readers who already understand or already feel these pressures, would have a way to break that down. It's not like it's anyone's job to educate me, but I do think it's fair to say that it is a nonfiction book's job to educate me, so I was a little disappointed by the generalization of women without any understanding or explanation to back that up. Now, I will agree with something else that she pointed out here, and that's the overwhelming loneliness that many people experience. Human loneliness is one of the hugest reasons that MLMs can thrive, and in my opinion, it's only gotten worse in recent decades. I'm personally not a religious person, and I think that things like mega churches or huge influential church communities tend to do more harm than good, but there is also no denying that along with the decline of church communities in America, we have seen greater human loneliness with no new communities to replace them. And this is something I loved seeing Amanda Montell cover in her book Cultish, which I've also reviewed on this channel. With the serious lack of things like walkable cities in the US, plus our recent pandemic isolation, plus the emphasis on nuclear families over extended families, plus a healthcare system that causes us to rely on our employers for health insurance, leading us to tie our entire lives up in our jobs, which means people are then willing to make cross-country or even international moves for work away for friends, family, and support systems just for their own survival. Yeah, all these things together cause people to be lonely. And I'd say that women and men both experience extreme loneliness, though it may often show up in different ways depending on the specific culture of your community or the specific circumstances of your life, kind of like how MLMs tend to target women and men differently. My point here is I do think Emily is right. I think she's right that women are really lonely right now, that women feel overwhelmed, and that women are tired of doing a disproportionate amount of work. But what I want to know is how we got to this point. Because, as I'm going to point out later, the way we got to this point is through the the exact same system that keeps MLMs afloat, and it's a real missed opportunity that she didn't dive in there. I especially noted that here when she was saying things like, we take time off from our jobs while our partners go back to work, maybe have a little maternity leave or assume more of the household duties, our days are stretched out, we're busier than ever. It's the we and the are here that feels like projection. This statement isn't true for all women, but it does start an interesting discussion about systemic misogyny. This should be backed up by a discussion of how capitalism takes away incentives from employers to hire or promote new moms or pregnant women, and why maternity leave can kill careers. The way it's written now kind of makes it sound like it's women's own fault due to personal choices, and that feels like it's victim blaming if we don't have any further explanation. The issue here is that this is never fully realized anywhere throughout the book, and the book itself then is going to start to actually perpetuate this mindset later on. Later on, we will delve into some parts in this book where it falls prey to that same misogynistic thought pattern and doesn't include any reflection as to why that's bad. So that was all just a really long-winded criticism to say we're going to get into some specific instances of misogyny in the book in a moment, but for now, let's delve into a couple things I like. I loved page 8 in this book. In page 8, we start to get to see how exactly MLMs use emotional manipulation through interpersonal conversations to trick people into wanting to join. Rather than vague discussions about womanhood as a whole, this page gives us a detailed scene, complete with dialogue that unfolds on the page. This has excellent info against MLM companies. It gives a great examination of in the moment how the process feels. So to set the scene, Emily is at a dinner being recruited into Rhode Island Fields, which in the book she calls Rejuvenate. Now, on the Life After MLM podcast, Emily explained that she chose to rename the MLM company in this book from Rhode Island Fields and instead chose to call it Rejuvenate in this book. Her reasoning for this is that she wanted to show that it wasn't about one specific MLM, but that really all MLMs are the same. She wanted the reader to put themselves in her shoes. No matter which MLM they're in, it's going to operate the exact same with the same tactics of abuse. Now, part of me does wish she named the MLM outright because Rhode Island Fields deserves to be named and shamed. And I also sort of wonder if maybe she was scared to name them because she was worried about getting a cease and desist or a legal threat from the company. But at the same time, I think this device of renaming the company also works fine. I could see an alternate version of this book where she does name the company outright and then someone who's like in doTERRA or something instead reads it and is like, yeah, well, my MLM isn't like that. We have XYZ specific differences, so it's not all the same. Like, yeah, Emily's right. That wouldn't be the point. So anyway, she calls it Rejuvenate, and here's what she says. So someone at the dinner asks her, people are asking what I was using on my hair, so why wouldn't I want to get in on that? Wash my hair and talk about it? It's so easy. Then Emily reflects, saying, they have a point. I can feel my earlier hesitation subside. As the endorsements ring out one after another, every single one targets an example of most women's insecurities, mine included. I can't help but perk up at the not-so-subtle subtext. Get rid of that mom bod. Help your postpartum acne and hair loss. Not enough money or friends? This opportunity's for you. It's nothing new in marketing and not singular to MLM, but MLMs have found a particularly effective, approachable way to target women's insecurities by offering us a neat little bundle of lifestyle solutions with a community of perky and positive friends to boot. So this I thought actually did give a good explanation as to the why and the how. This is what I wanted more of earlier. Emily's telling us about her personal insecurities, about healing her acne or working on her skin, and also feeling like she doesn't have enough friends. By showing how the people at the table were then targeting her specific insecurities, the scene becomes impactful. I like how she weaves in a little bit of her own skepticism along the way. This is what I really like about the memoir style approach to this book. Getting to see Emily's internal monologue shows us exactly how she justified her own reservations about joining the company to herself, how she quieted those skeptical voices in her own head, and how during the few times that she did try to raise a question, the current MLM members squashed it, encouraging her to silence that skeptical voice. We see the indoctrination beginning, unfolding in front of us as the reader. So overall, I thought this page's writing was great. Now, on page 9, on the other hand, I once again had some mixed feelings. Emily draws parallels between MLM companies and sorority culture in colleges.
A sorority that can party?
Which I can definitely see to an extent, especially the parts where like you call each other sisters and you have to do certain rituals together and you pay certain dues to be part of the club. I get it. But once again, this section felt generalized and stereotyped without enough specific detail to make the point. She says, I remember going through sorority rush for the first time and feeling so much love, then participating in the following year only to realize how much judgment went into it. The attractive, thin, well-to-do co-eds were the benchmark. If you were wanted by your favorite house, it felt like an achievement. Yet when you pulled back the curtain, you realized you were just another pretty face to fill their lineup. This is again an overgeneralization. She started talking about her own experience, but then transitioned it into this second person. You were just another pretty face to fill the lineup when you pulled back the curtain. I don't like her use of the second person here. I wish she just instead went forward with telling one of her own stories and let her own sorority story unfold in more detail. Or maybe she could have shared various testimonies from sorority girls who later went into MLMs and found the tactics to be similar. Now, I went to nerd college, okay? So my experience probably wasn't the norm, but my sorority experience was literally nothing like this. My sorority was music themed, and we had women of all demographics in our sorority. We had plus size women, we had trans women, we had non-binary people. The only thing I ever even felt insecurity about was the fact that I'm literally tone deaf because it was a music sorority and everyone else there was great singing in the choir, and I was just there because I enjoyed living in a house with tons of friends and using my mediocre saxophone skills to play in my sorority's jazz band that we ran out of the basement of the house. Many of the girls I knew in Chi Omega, for example, were queer women, sometimes non-feminine presenting. One friend I had who was in Chi Omega is now married to another woman, and almost all of her sorority sisters that I met at the wedding were also queer women. Another friend that I had who was also in Chi Omega at the time identified as a butch lesbian but is now a transgender man. It really depends. This wildly depends on your school, and I went to a Big Ten school. It's not like I went to some like small leftist women's college in the Pacific Northwest or something. My point is sororities are going to vary wildly. A lot of the media already likes to stereotype sorority girls as vapid, superficial, unintelligent young adults existing in a state of arrested teenage development, and honestly, I find these generalizations to be sexist.
It's not sexist, that's the bloke saying it.
Plus, that's nothing to say for the vibrant sorority culture among Black women, especially at HBCUs. It makes me start to wonder if Emily's entire target audience is just people who are exactly like her. Upper middle class white women who have kids, had a bad time in their college sorority, and feel more pressure to do domestic labor than their male partner. But this video is nothing if not a compliment club sandwich, and because of that, I have to point out that on this same page there was something that I loved, and that's when Emily stops comparing MLMs to sororities and instead starts comparing them to cults. Her explanation of how cults work is so well done. She says, "First, I recognize cult is a strong word, generally drawing allusions to the Jonestown Massacre or the Children of God, but the same mind control tactics are used by high-pressure organizations ranging from educational institutions to corporations in similar ways, sometimes destructively and sometimes very innocently. Cultism is a spectrum. As Amanda Montell describes in her book Cultish, though the stakes and consequences of respective affiliations differ considerably, the methods used to assert power, to create community and solidarity, to establish an us and a them, to align collective values to justify questionable behavior, to instill ideology and inspire fear, are uncannily cultishly similar." And I completely agree here, especially regarding what Amanda Montell said in her book Cultish. Cults absolutely exist on a spectrum, and it's important to notice the same harmful behaviors even when they're not at the absolute worst or most extreme they could be. Joining a really intense CrossFit gym is not the same as joining Heaven's Gate, not even close. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look out for the same tactics of emotional abuse that people may be using on you, even though there might be more benign in a CrossFit gym or something like that.
I'm feeling skinny, Tony.
I think this breakdown is important because it could be really easy for someone who's pro-MLM to say, oh my god, how can you say MLMs are cults? Cults are out here killing people, drugging people, making people live alone on giant plots of land in the middle of nowhere. All my company does is just sell lipstick that's so insensitive and offensive to real cult victims. And that can just shut down the conversation. But like I always say, an important piece of navigating disagreements is defining your terms. This book helps clarify exactly what you mean when you say cult. You can agree with your opponent that an MLM isn't a cult at the same level that Jonestown might be, but that all cults exist on a spectrum and that MLMs exhibit some of the same harmful behaviors. I love that she took the time to break that down. Now we're going to move into chapter 2, which is called I'm Positive That You Suck. Honestly, this book had some really great chapter titles, and this was one of my favorite ones because it was such a humorous critique of the toxic positivity mindset that we often see in MLMs. So throughout the first chapter, while Emily was at first telling the story of her friends trying to recruit her into the MLM Rejuvenate, she frequently brought up that she was afraid of how complicated it was going to be when she finally told her husband that she was joining and how she wanted to keep it a secret because she was nervous of how he might react. This scene was built up so much in the previous chapter that I was a little disappointed when chapter 2 started out like this. "Mama, the delivery man is here," my 4-year-old yells from the living room as a UPS brings a package to the door. "My toddler's on my hip as I peer around the corner. Wow, it's big, it's pink, it's adorned with the Rejuvenate logo. It's not the first one I've received as of late, or second, or 20th. Between Rejuvenate and my Amazon habit, I've had to increase the capacity of our recycling service, but it's a small price to pay for the joy of boxes on my porch like every day is Christmas." My husband wasn't initially thrilled that I signed up to do something like this, and sadly he did find out via Facebook, but as I started bringing home a little bit of money, he was happy to see me finally finding some joy in my contribution to the family. I'm not going to be the one to burst his bubble and let him know I technically haven't made any money yet because I've been buying more products and promotional items, paying a babysitter for our nights out with clients, and indulging that darn Amazon habit, but he's generally fine with this new side hobby. Okay, that scene was built up to so much in previous sections of the book. Emily was so scared of how her husband was going to react, but then we just get a bunch of summary of what happened without any scene other than the 4-year-old yelling that the delivery man was there.
Mom! The meatloaf!
My main issue here is how the writing just isn't as impactful as it could have been. We could have gone on an emotional roller coaster with Emily as she battled her nerves to tell her husband, the relief that washed over her as she finally let the words come out of her mouth, the anticipation of watching him work through his mixed emotions on the topic. Did they have any disagreements early on? Can we see how they played out? How did she end up convincing him? Use some dialogue! As it is, this feels very empty and surface level for a memoir. Normally, I wouldn't mind because everyone's personal business is their own. However, so much of this book is focused on Emily's personal story that it feels like a ripoff to me as the reader when I don't get to see those heavy moments fully fleshed out. If she wanted to jump in time over parts of her story that she didn't feel like telling, the book would have done better to include woven in collections of true stories from other women in MLMs as well, more like a journalistic approach rather than just one person's memoir. A scene like this just makes me very confused about what exactly the book is trying to be.
So I am confusion.
We have a similar problem later on page 26. She says, "Isn't it funny how even though I'm not expected to carry inventory, I somehow have this shit everywhere?" I mean, yeah, I agree, that is funny. But again, we've skipped over a key scene here in favor of just jumping to a snarky remark and giving a summary. She was told by the people who were trying to recruit her into the MLM that the company had no minimum. She wouldn't have to carry inventory if she didn't want to. But now she's carrying inventory. So how did that happen? I want to see the steps that got us there. What exact tactics did the other women in the MLM use to convince her to buy inventory? How exactly was she manipulated into it? What thought process did she go through before giving in and buying inventory? How did she justify it to herself? How did the others try to justify it to her? If this book is meant to be a tool to help with anti-MLM, someone who's currently in an MLM could just say something like, well, it's your fault for ignoring the no minimums rule. Yeah, I mean, that is victim blaming. I think that's a cruel thing to say, but it also is a sign that this book is failing as a resource because it doesn't directly show us on the page how the manipulation happened, which would both serve to garner sympathy for Emily and also to warn others what these tactics might look like. Now, page 38, on the other hand, I loved. This is where Emily's writing skills really shone through, and I really wish we got more of that in those previous places where I mentioned that it was lacking. Page 38 is where I realized what an excellent companion this book can be to Robert Fitzpatrick's Ponzi-nomics. That book arms you with a lot of statistics, mathematical breakdowns, while this book really draws out the human element of the story. This page talks about retention events, which are events that reps are encouraged to attend. As it says, these retention events, as described by Jason Jones, an attorney and advocate for victims of manipulation fraud, are designed to keep people in the commercial cult as long as possible. He describes 3 levels on the path of retention: recruits, the people at the bottom of the pyramid; grinders, those who do the greatest amount of work and put on these events; and profiteers, the people at the very top who do little work and make the most of the money. The objective of these events, whether they are biz ops, conventions, or Zoom calls, is to move people from the recruits into the grinders category, keeping them there as long as possible, at least 3 to 4 years. The goal is not to get them to the profiteers level, because mathematically, virtually nobody makes it there. So this was an excellent breakdown of the how. It wove in the facts and expert testimony in seamlessly with Emily's story about her own time attending one of these events, and it showed readers step by step how this piece of the indoctrination unfolds. Now, on the subject of how Emily very successfully weaves in fact with story, I think we should look at page 47, which is, in my opinion, where she absolutely knocked it out of the park. But she talks about the bite model, which was developed by former cult member turned anti-cult activist and author Stephen Hassan, which a lot of anti-MLM activists use to show how MLMs parallel commercial cults. We've talked a lot about the bite model on this channel before, like when I reviewed Stephen Hassan's book, The Cult of Trump, about 2 years ago, but for a quick refresher, B is for behavioral control, I is for information control, T is for thought control, and E is for emotional control. Those are the topics we can easily pay lip service to, but it's not always easy to see exactly how they play out in a real world situation. That's why I think the passage on page 47 is so brilliant. It directly draws that connection for us as the reader. So in this scene, Emily is about to speak at an event for her MLM company, and she's a little nervous for her first presentation. She recounts the speech that she gave, but within her transcription of what she said, she puts in brackets which parts of the bite model she's utilizing in each sentence of the speech. It reads, "Hi, I'm Emily. I live in Seattle and I'm the mom of 5 small kids. Emotional control. I'm so relatable and do so much. You only have 2 children. Wow, you have so much time on your hands. I've been with Rejuvenate for about 6 months. Thought control. You too can succeed in no time at all. I didn't think I'd ever do something like this because, like many of you probably do, I had plenty of reservations. Information control, but you'd better ignore that intuition. I haven't been in the workforce for a long time, and since I'm a stay-at-home mom, this fits so well in the nooks and crannies of my life. Behavior control. I'll show you how to work all the time. My skin and hair are the best they've ever looked. Information control. They already looked great before Rejuvenate. And all I do is use the products and talk about them. Behavior control. You'll literally do this all the goddamn time. The best part is the friendships. I found my sisterhood with this company. Emotional control. You need friends, right? You lonely piece of shit. I have money for a babysitter and I feel like I have purpose. Thought control. You also need to want those things. If you feel like you're missing friendships or money or want a vehicle for change, emotional control. You need more out of your sad existence. This business is for you. Behavior control. Join or else your life is going to continue to suck. See how cool that is? I thought the execution of that writing tactic was just fantastic. We got to see the exact breakdown of how the manipulation plays out in a speech that Emily herself gave, which also shows us a degree of her own self-reflection on her understanding of herself as both the victim and the perpetrator from the thesis that she set up in the introduction. A passage like this is also really helpful for anyone who needs to identify these tactics in everyday conversation, since she also clearly points out how they might show up. The next chapter is called The Lady Bosses. Like all chapters in this book, it starts with a quote from a former MLM rep. Every chapter begins with a former MLMer's testimony about how awful their time in their company was. And honestly, I wish we'd gotten a lot more of these woven into Emily's story. As I mentioned, she already weaves in facts and statistics and expert testimony within her own story, so why not weave in and expand on these other rep stories in there as well? In my opinion, that would make the book a lot more of a resource and a lot less of a sort of memoir. Anyway, I love the quote at the top of page 57 at the start of this chapter from a former MLM rep named Kelsey. It says, "I earned a cruise from my upline. However, after qualifying, I realized it was only partially paid. My husband and I figured it was an investment in my business and a fun getaway for ourselves. It was fine, but we had the smallest cabin, terrible flights, and everything cost more than we anticipated. The worst part? Come tax time, I was slapped with a $10,000 fine from the IRS because I was supposed to file quarterly taxes. My income was inflated thanks to that, quote, free trip being tacked on as earnings. It was devastating. I had to borrow money from my parents and I'm still paying them back. I would have never worked so hard to earn the trip had I known it would be so detrimental." Isn't that heartbreaking? Stories like these hit really hard since they show us just how deep this manipulation runs on a systemic level, like getting a fine from the IRS. It shows how tied in this all is with our corporate apologist capitalist system and how MLMs are able to use an already exploitative system to take advantage of people even further. I just wish we'd gotten a full interview or a scene from Kelsey woven into the story further in this chapter. A quote at the beginning of the chapter is easy to just skip, easy to just miss and read over, and I think these testimonies deserve to be in the main body of the story woven into the main narrative. On page 64, a little later in this chapter, we start to get an amalgamation of all the issues I've had so far. An unclear target audience, generalizations of women as a whole, assuming the audience has more information already than they might have, and an almost victim-blaming tone towards women and femininity when that critique should be towards late-stage capitalism as an entire system. Let me show you what I mean. So Emily's about to head out on the retreat. She's at the airport. "Bye guys, love you," I call as I hurry into the airport, practically gasping for air. I need this. Every woman at the retreat needs it. And this is one thing Rejuvenate gets right. We have been suffocated by our roles as mothers and wives, sacrificing previous careers, dreams, and freedom on the altar of motherhood. But without a good excuse to get away, most of us would have never dreamed of leaving our families for the weekend. Modern motherhood can be so disempowering, all while the weight of the world feels like it's resting on our shoulders. Beth Berry, author of Motherwhelmed, describes the master list of why modern-day motherhood feels so frustrating, which includes more than 30 different points such as having no village, rising workload, being exhausted and spread thin, and feeling like we need to buy tons of stuff, and feeling the pressure to bounce back to a pre-baby body after pregnancy, among others. Motherhood is meant to overwhelm us, she concludes. So I have a few questions about this. First, remember that I'm super neurodivergent and I don't always pick up on a lot of the social cues that I'm supposed to, and all my questions here and things that I don't understand about this section could literally just be a me problem, and if so, like, I'm sorry for wasting your time. Take that disclaimer as I break this down. Where it says, quote, "We have been suffocated by our roles as mothers and wives, sacrificing previous careers, dreams, and freedom on the altar of motherhood." So this book has a recurring point about how women are more likely to give up on their dreams than men are. This point is taken as a given without ever exploring why this happens. Here, Emily is making the assumption that all women are already aware that this happens, have already felt this pressure, and already understand why it happens.
Shut up! You're killing me, Smalls.
Now, I do have an idea of why it happens, and that's because of America's culture of worshiping corporations. This section should be just a huge critique of capitalism. So I, as a most likely autistic, halfway to an autism diagnosis person, a person who views the world extremely literally, I used to really struggle with understanding what I was being socialized to do and to want as a woman. That's actually one of the reasons that I started critiquing Boss Babe books in the first place. They all had this angle of women are discouraged from being as loud as men, from speaking up as often, from bragging as often, etc. And like, I'm sure that's that's true, but I'm just too socially unaware to have ever picked up on that before, and this was like news to me. When I read this was the first time I was ever told this, is when I read it in Boss Babe books in my mid-20s. All my life, I've been the loud one. I brag about myself all the time, and the thought of prioritizing a man's life goals over mine never once even crossed my mind. And I need to just emphasize this real quick for my neurotypical viewers. I don't mean that I chose not to. I didn't make an active decision to prioritize myself as a form of woman's empowerment. I mean that it just literally, the thought never once crossed my mind that there was any other way to think about it until I started reading Boss Babe books in my mid-20s while trying to learn marketing. I wasn't any stronger or more confident than anyone else. I was just completely oblivious. And I'm not at all saying this is a better way to live your life. In fact, due to the fact that I've now learned that apparently people judge women for these behaviors, it could be why a lot of people don't like me.
We don't like you, man! We hate you!
Why I've struggled to keep some friendships throughout my life.
You're tacky and I hate you.
And why I've been told that I'm a lot and too much. Now, I used to think that it was a compliment to be told that you're a lot, because being a lot is a good thing, right? Like having a lot of money is good, having not very much money is bad, a lot is a good thing. But I took that too literally again and didn't understand that I was being like politely critiqued. Anyway, it's not like I took this as a compliment or didn't understand this out of some kind of like girl power motivational type of inspiration. I just literally didn't know that this was a bad thing until someone told it to me verbatim. I'm considering in the future writing like a new adult coming of age women's fiction novel about the very specific situations that come from being a hot girl who doesn't learn you're autistic until your late 20s. Is that something that you guys would be interested in? I'm curious. Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, that's super off topic. My point is, when someone tells me a fact like women are more likely to give up their careers for kids than men are, or women are more likely to spend on products to improve their appearance than men are, I always ask,
But why?
I agree that it's true, and we can see that it's true, but I want to examine why this happens. And the only reason I can think of is that we have this cultural obsession with financial profit. When you look at our healthcare systems and our obsession with free markets and deregulation, you can kind of see where this is going. How does this fit into Emily's point here? Well, the main reason I would think that women would give up their careers more often than men is this. Women are more likely to get pregnant than men are. When you carry a child, your body has physical limitations. When an employer defines success solely by profit, then cutting costs and maximizing revenue is the only way to operate. One way to cut costs is to hire employees for the cheapest amount you can get away with. This is why we have labor exploitation as well. So if someone gets pregnant, that pregnancy has the potential to affect your productivity, which could then require paying someone and getting less output in return, which the business owner will say, ooh, that's bad. Yes, it's illegal for employers to ask candidates about their pregnancy status or to discriminate based on it, but that doesn't mean people don't find ways to sneakily get away with it, like looking for a wedding ring during the interview or engaging in some small talk about your personal life to just siphon some information about your future family plans. So if an employer realizes that they're going to have to give maternity leave and have a pregnant employee with potentially less output, then the bottom line of profit above all incentivizes them to hire someone who runs no risk of getting pregnant, which is usually going to be a man, not always, but usually. As a result, women are less likely to get promoted into higher paying fields because an employee who's deemed a risk could jeopardize profits if they're making too much of the company's money and don't give the same output. So when a majority of male-female couples start planning for children, it's more statistically likely that the man is already going to be in a position of making more money due to the fact that the women were systemically discriminated against for the higher paying positions going into it. Childcare is labor, and because of that, daycares cost money, nannies cost money, babysitters cost money, preschools often before the age of 4 tend to cost money. The kids might have to end up staying home if the parents can't afford any of those services because, once again, in order to survive in a country with no UBI, no universal health care, almost no safety nets against poverty, the couple needs to maximize how much money they can save, which means it's too risky for the man to be the one to leave his job and stay home and be a stay-at-home dad. And if they can't afford childcare, then it's usually going to be financially logical for the woman to either cut back her hours or leave the workforce entirely. Hence, why more women are statistically more likely to become stay-at-home moms than men are to become stay-at-home dads. Now, as a disclaimer, I'm not saying that this is true in all cases. Plenty of women and men both become stay-at-home parents because that's what they want to do, and they prefer it and find it more fulfilling than working a career. Regardless of gender, that's absolutely fine. That's your choice. The problem is when financial systems force people into it, just as it's also a problem on the flip side when financial survival requires both parents to work when one really does want to stay home with the kids. Both of these situations are exploitative. The reason I break this down here is not to neglect all the people who become stay-at-home parents because they want to, just like I wouldn't neglect people who work because they want to, rather than because a capitalist society demands labor from those who wish to survive. Now, the reason I'm spending so much time explaining this is because this book treats it as a given, as if we're just supposed to take it at face value and never question the systems that are causing such a great disparity. But when you look deeper, you see that every single step of the way, this disparity only exists because of a motivation based on money. At the end of the day, money money is king. Money is what drives and motivates us all because in order to survive, it has to. And that's exactly what MLMs exploit. I really hate that this point itself isn't fully explored in this book because that's what this book is supposed to be about. But instead, my autistic ass is just supposed to take it at face value that women are just more likely to sacrifice their careers because they are. Without any explanation of the capitalist incentives pressuring women into it. The exact same capitalist incentives that scam people within MLM companies. Why isn't this explored? This is the point. This is the entire point of the book, and it's never fleshed out. Now, the following page 65, has this issue again. The writing's very surface level, and we never explore the why or the how. We're at the point where Emily has reached the 3% circle within her Rejuvenate company, and she's actually bringing in a profit each month, now off the backs of other women, of course, which is something that Emily does eventually realize, examine, and reflect on later, and we'll get into that later. But right now, a fellow MLM rep named Shelly asks Emily, I can't wait to be where you are. How'd you do it? I pause for a second, surprised that Shelly hasn't reached the 3% circle yet. She's been doing Rejuvenate for 5 years and she's still a station 0? I don't have to question this too much. Rejuvenate has conveniently trained us to understand why some don't succeed. She must not be working hard enough, I think to myself. After all, I'm in the top 3% after only 1 year. Again, had I been paying any kind of attention to red flags, I would have seen that I was a rare 3%er in a world of station 0s. I might have even wondered how consultants like Shelly were paying for this trip without the hard-earned stipend or the commission money to cover the additional costs. I might have wondered what their investment looked like in comparison to my investment or compared to their income. Instead, I order another drink and gloat to my audience who are all hanging on my words, desperate to glean how I've achieved such hollowed status in a short time. I mean, I do what I can, I explain. I attend all my new recruit business launches, I help them enroll their customers, just leading by example, you know? I'm glad that this section emphasizes the way that MLMs use thought-stopping tactics and try to prevent people from asking questions. That absolutely is an important piece of the cult-like nature of these companies. But what I don't get is why Emily, who's now writing this book today, looking back with all the knowledge that she has now, never actually answers this question for us as the audience. We know that she's bullshitting when she says to Shelly, like, I do what I can, I just go to all the company events, but we as the audience never actually get to learn the real reason. After reading this entire book, I still don't know how Emily made so much more money than the others in the company. As we know, and as Emily herself cites in this book, John M. Taylor's study posted to the FTC public comments decades ago found that more than 99% of people in MLM companies will actually lose money, and in Ponzi-nomics, Robert Fitzpatrick estimates that this number is even higher than 99.7%. But Emily was one of the few who turned a real profit from the company. On the one hand, this makes her testimony even more powerful. Even someone who made it to the top, who really did get the financial rewards that she was promised, still thinks that the company was a scam. But at the same time, it's weird that nowhere in this book does she tell us what actually made her able to do what 99.7% of others couldn't. Maybe she's ashamed of how manipulative she was, or maybe she scammed people in a way she can't talk to us about because it's incriminating, or maybe she was just weirdly lucky and this was random. But I think it's odd that the book doesn't actually tell us what it was that set her apart, because without that exploration of a motive, Emily's starting to become a little sus as a narrator. Now, like I said earlier, the thesis of this book, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is that MLM reps become both victims and predators by nature of the company. We know that Emily, as a narrator, as the protagonist of her own story, is going to be a morally gray anti-hero rather than a wholesome leading lady. And I like that about this book. But when she refuses to ever explore what it actually was that set her in particular apart, what tactics she was willing to employ that others weren't, it makes me start to worry that her narration itself is unreliable. That maybe a piece of that scammer is still inside of her? And there are red flags to this later on, which we're going to point out as well. This book also tries to delve into some racial dynamics within the MLM world and how MLMs uphold white supremacy as a system. I was really interested to learn about this, but again, this point is unfortunately completely underdeveloped. There is one place in the book where Emily gives a bit of history about racism within MLMs, and it's on page 69. Nice, page 69. She says, in the MLM world, feminism is redefined as women having it all, so it's no surprise MLMs specifically target mothers taking advantage of their already underpaid and undervalued work. This is only exacerbated among women of color because they aren't even being considered in the MLM demographic. Ijeoma Oluo, author of So You Want to Talk About Race, describes white supremacy as the nation's original pyramid scheme. The system of capitalism is a brutal system that exploits almost everyone. The promise was that you were going to get something out of it, that you were going to be better off than black people, that if you worked hard enough, you were going to rise to the top in a way that people of color never would because it was your birthright, not theirs. So I thought Emily's explanation of how the free market ideal and a worship of capitalism has a disproportionate harm on black women was good. But this is really just the tippy top of the iceberg, and it's barely even that. Emily defines white supremacy in this book multiple times, but never actually explains how MLMs uphold it. On page 66, she says, "White supremacy is about the indoctrination into an ideal of whiteness that the majority of people in the world don't fit into. It works because it hinges on the unconscious acceptance of this ideal, even by those who do not fulfill it." True. I mean, yeah, the American dream is a false ideal of social mobility that wealthy white men tend to like more than others do because they're usually the ones profiting from it the most. But again, how? Like with the discussion of maternity leave and women being forced out of employment before, I could spend another 10 minutes now breaking down potential historical reasons as to why this happens. I could talk about all of those things, but this is a book review. This is not the book itself. I'm disappointed that Emily didn't offer up any explanation of these things or explain any other racially prejudiced systems in the US that allows MLMs to thrive. In fact, outside of quoting another author who very intelligently compares white supremacy to a pyramid scheme, Emily basically never draws any real connection between MLMs and racism whatsoever, other to say that most MLM companies are majority white. But that means that 99.7% of white people are losing money in those companies. So would it be more fair if we had an equal number of black people also losing lots of money? I don't understand her point here because she doesn't actually make one. It feels a lot like she just liked the alliteration of sales, sisterhood, supremacy in her subtitle and then forgot to actually write about white supremacy in the book until her editor reminded her about it in the last draft, so she forced in a few lines that don't make any contextual sense.
But in a much more real sense, I had no idea what to do.
I don't know if that actually happened, that's just how it feels to me. Like on page 68, for example, when she says, "Just as the patriarchy assumes that masculinity is the norm, white feminism assumes that the lived experiences of white cis heterosexual women are the default. Empowering women may or may not entail encouraging them to also buy products to make them thinner, richer, or less wrinkled, but it certainly shouldn't require stepping on other women or ignoring black or brown or LGBTQ women in order to achieve that goal." Yes, I agree with that sentiment. You can't empower women in general if you're only empowering a specific subset of women, often wealthy straight white women. But again, this statement is dropped into the page without any context. Before this paragraph, Emily's talking in depth about the history of Amway and how Amway's ties to the US government helped the SEC excuse their behavior back in the 1970s and 80s, which sets the precedent for other MLMs to avoid legal consequences as well. Very interesting story, but then bam, we just get that out of nowhere. It's just so poorly written that it loses all of its impact, and I can't figure out why she chose to place this discussion here rather than weaving it into a more relevant piece of her MLM journey like she does so well with the cult breakdowns earlier in the book. And once again, there's no connection, no synthesis, no exploration of the why. Once again, I brainstormed a few ideas. So, for example, MLM companies like Unique have been accused of racism in the past when they've offered a much wider range of makeup shades to white women, not offering dark enough shades of foundation or concealer palettes that match darker skin tones. So that right there, that's an example of an MLM company prioritizing white women as the default. Here's another. When George Floyd was murdered by police in 2020, Beachbody allowed their reps to promote something called the Can't Breathe workout, which I'm not going to show on screen or ever talk about ever again because of how sickening that is to remember. Another thing, when people did Blackout Tuesday in favor of the Black Lives Matter movement, Monat used this as a marketing opportunity to sell more shitty shampoo. My whole point is there are tons of specific examples of MLMs trying to profit off of racism itself. Use those in the book. We can do this with LGBTQ issues as well. We can talk about how MLMs target straight women primarily because many of them have connections to deeply religious communities that are extremely homophobic, like Young Living's ties with conservative Mormons in Utah. Amway emphasizes Christianity and the nuclear family as part of its culture to the point where many LGBTQ women would likely feel excluded. Or we can talk about one of the things I did a video on 2 years ago, which is how Pure Romance sponsored the Cincinnati Pride Parade, but then also had reps turning away trans women from their events because they claimed that their parties were for cis women only. There! I just came up with a ton of examples. None of these or any examples like these are ever used in this book. We're just told that MLMs are racist and sexist and homophobic, which I agree they are, but if this book is to be a resource for those educating others on the anti-MLM movement, it doesn't actually give us any information that we can use to educate ourselves or others on this concept. I will say though, because Emily does a good job with her comparison of MLMs to cults, she also does a really great job in drawing parallels to Donald Trump and his influence, which makes sense since Trump was also known of running a few MLMs of his own. On page 71, Emily is talking about attending her first retreat with her MLM company. She's feeling a little exhausted from traveling out to the cabin, but then her upline excitedly greets her at the door and she feels a lot better seeing her community standing there in front of her. She says, "Emily, you made it!" she cries, handing me my swag bag. Attention, hugs, and conversation filled the the room, praise is issued for putting business first, gifts are given, and there's empowerment all around. A few years later, I will watch a Trump rally and realize why there are so many diehard fans. Because when you are routinely forgotten and ignored, all it takes is one person with power to legitimize your existence. This is the heart of the MLM structure. I thought this was fantastic, and it made me realize that this book isn't only a great companion to Ponzinomics, but also to Stephen Hassan's book, The Cult of Trump. That book breaks down the ways that Trump uses textbook cult rhetoric to keep his followers invested in him as a leader, and I think Emily did a fabulous job of paralleling this with MLM influence. Again, we're seeing where Emily's real strength is in this book, and that's in weaving in reflection, which includes her analysis of the facts she learned later on, with the way that she felt at the time, in the moment, and showing the contrast of those two sets of emotions. This is brilliant memoir writing, in my opinion. This strategy then continued throughout the rest of the chapter. On pages 76 and 77, Emily does a fantastic job of breaking down why MLMs use the be your own boss narrative and why that's a lie. She says, "You are not the CEO of a company if that company already has a CEO. As an MLM lady boss, I couldn't choose my own products, shop suppliers, set my own prices, or have any say in marketing. My commission level was decided for me. I was told what and how often I could post on social media with a laundry list of things I could and couldn't say. Though I touted this opportunity as a virtual franchise on the regular, it was anything but, since it guaranteed no exclusive rights to sell in a particular area. Instead, I was competing with any number of reps, many of whom were on my own team, selling identical products at identical prices in a saturated market. It's the reason Josie Nikoi, former MLM rep and host of the Not the Good Girl on YouTube, calls an MLM a house of cards built on sand. It takes very little to bring it down." Two things I loved about this. First, the way she completely debunks the narrative that MLMs are in any way tied to entrepreneurship. MLM reps are not entrepreneurs by nature of being in the MLM company. They're contract workers with no guaranteed base pay. I often see MLM reps trying to say it's more like a franchise, that of course you have to pay to join because you'd have to pay to franchise your own McDonald's too, so who cares? And I really appreciate that Emily pointed out the key difference here, which is that as an MLM rep, you have no guaranteed territory rights, which allows for oversaturation. But the other thing I absolutely loved about this section is that she cited Josie Nikoi of Not the Good Girl. It's so rare that we see traditional media like books, TV, newspapers, etc., giving credit to new media creators like YouTubers, podcasters, and independent journalists. In the back of the book, Emily recommends a bunch of anti-MLM resources, including YouTube channels and podcasts, which includes my channel, so I genuinely appreciated seeing that. That was a really nice surprise. I remember a few years ago when the New York Times broke that post-Toiletgate article about the downfall of Rachel Hollis and her career, they refused to cite any YouTubers despite the fact that it was largely my videos, Mooncat's videos, and Kiki Chanel's videos that even exposed the way her MLM speeches were scamming people in the first place. I'd really been feeling for a long time like independent media creators often don't get cited and nobody gives them credit and we get treated like we're just teens posting on social media rather than people who are actually writing, researching, and creating our own media that educates other people and provides information that should be cited as a source. So genuine thank you to Emily for doing that. More writers need to follow her lead here. Pages 80 through 83 were very strong as well for similar reasons. They break down specifically what is wrong with MLM tactics, and they debunk so much of the rhetoric that MLM reps use when they're trying to recruit you. On pages 81 to 82, Emily acknowledges the dreaded income disclosure statement, you know, the thing that MLMs are required by law to post on their site so that people can see how much reps are actually making in the companies, but the reps always find a way to twist it. She says, "Income disclosure statements are made to be complicated for a reason, so we won't dig into them too much. The particular IDS I was meant to link to showed that only 2% of paid consultants earned more than $20,000 that year, which is a lot less than you can earn with a regular job. With a field of 400,000 consultants, 99.5% are earning less than minimum wage. Oh, but there's more. The problem with the income disclosures from MLMs is that they are not accurate or substantiated, and that there's no formal standard for what they must disclose regarding making income claims. No IDS that is currently publicly available from any MLM includes reasonable expenses. So much money is spent on the initial product kit and required recurring purchases, but there are also all the hidden costs of participating in an MLM, especially among their target market, moms. These include obtaining childcare for meetings, transportation costs to get to those meetings, sales aids and office supplies, postage, hosting parties, travel expenses for conferences and conventions, outfits for elaborate parties, additional costs to attend, and possibly time off from your real job. Basically all the things you're told you need in this business to be successful. These should be listed as reasonable expenses to consider the income disclosure, but they aren't." Breaking down the income disclosures of 61 MLM's compensation plans from 2019, there were 106 companies on my list that I could not find an IDS for, which says something. The range of MLM members who lost money is between 73 and 99.9%, with an industry-wide average of 92.3%. The number of reps who make more than $30,000 a year, again before taxes and expenses, is an abysmal 0.5%. As a rep, you're led to believe and told to share clear that the IDS doesn't really matter because so many people join for the discount. That means if 5 out of 10 reps join for the discount alone and don't intend to sell, the sales numbers are going to be low on average. That factor is used to dispel concerns when potential recruits question the abysmal numbers in the IDS. Don't worry, Susan, it's not accurate because so many women join for the discount. Companies do not break down this segment of reps in the income disclosure, but the company could easily supply these numbers since they know how many reps they have at a given time and how many reps are actually selling at any given time. Why don't they? One can only assume that supplying these numbers doesn't help the IDS, or else they could make the numbers look much better by including the join for the discount reps. This entire section was so satisfying to read. Just one by one, she's taking down all the points that MLM recruiters try to use when claiming you can't trust the income disclosure, especially the whole some people just join for the discount thing. The next chapter is called That Time of the Month, which once again, I loved as a chapter title. It's a pun. You guys know I'm a sucker for puns, and that time of the month here is actually talking about the end of the month when all MLM reps have to reach their sales quotas to keep their rankings. Good job on the chapter title, loved that. I also thought the way Emily wove in themes from her personal life along with the anti-MLM points was very well done here. She talks about how one time of the month was the end of October, or Halloween, where she's struggling to reach her quotas while also managing trick-or-treating with her kids. On page 93, right after her kids have rung a doorbell and said trick-or-treat, she says, "Oh, don't you look cute?" a woman gushes as she fills the kids' plastic pumpkins with candy. I have to admit, she's right. Damn, I have some cute kids, but these cute kids need to finish the hell up because mama's got some quotas to fill and my wine mug is empty. I loved this. It's a perfect example of the false freedom that MLMs promise. MLMs are always telling you, don't you want to stay home with your kids? Don't you want to make money and be there for all the important moments in their lives? But in this moment, Emily is distracted from trick-or-treating with her kids, hoping that they finish the hell up because her brain is much more focused on sales for her company rather than being present in a fun moment with her family. This perfectly illustrates how the whole time freedom promise of an MLM is false. It's a scam. So we're gonna go through a few more positives of this book before we're gonna get into the serious misogyny issues that I really had an issue with that are about to come up. But first, I will say that I thought the next 2 chapters of the book were both very well written, easy to read, engaging. They did a great job educating the target audience on the harms of MLMs. We often hear stories of how MLMs encourage people to put the company above everything else in their life. To work from home, work on the beach, work from your kid's school, work from the hospital, work, work, work. And I think Emily has such a fantastic story to demonstrate how far this can go and how absolutely disgusting it can become. On pages 132 to 133, Emily is in the process of trying to recruit a locally famous hairstylist named Madison onto her MLM team while also waiting at the doctor for results of a test. Remember that whole freedom thing MLMs say they offer? Yeah, now Emily's having to do work while at the doctor. Much freedom. Very boss babe.
So, 1 hour of freedom.
She says, something stops my scroll immediately. A notification about a new post from a locally famous hairstylist I follow. She's a dream teamer for sure. I hop over her page to see what she posted. My jaw drops when I read, "Hi all, want to learn more about Rejuvenate? If I have any followers who are reps, please message me." Oh my god, shut up. I practically leap off the table. This is huge. How do I stand out? Phew, I'll have to think about this. Too much pressure in the doctor's office. In the meantime, I decide it's a perfect opportunity to show how I can work from anywhere, and I lean back to take a selfie when the doctor walks in. Awkward. Sorry to keep you waiting, she stammers. She looks serious. No worries, I was just catching up on a little work. Here we go. Never pass up an opportunity to show the opportunity. Shit, maybe that's why she called me in today. Who knows? She doesn't waste any time before telling me. Unfortunately, I have some bad news, Emily. Your results came back and they show malignancy. Are you saying it's cancer? I ask. Yes, I'm sorry. Luckily, we caught it early and it should be an easy surgery. This has really taken a turn. I can't process the enormity of what I've just been given, and I'm still thinking of how to spin it to ask if I can put a display of my products in her office. And now I wonder how I can be the face of the business from a hospital bed. This will be a true test of how flexible this business actually is. In an MLM, you are expected to work from anywhere because that's part of the draw, sold as a perk when you join, but working from anywhere actually means working from everywhere. Sitting at home with the kids, send some messages, have a lunch break, do some recruiting. I can't tell you the number of times I saw photos of people proudly working from doctor's offices like the selfie I just took, but also hospital beds while in labor, at weddings, sometimes their own, in traffic, even at funerals. The allure of being able to work from anywhere becomes the burden of being required to be on call 24/7. Now, I thought this story was so impactful. Emily's now torn between recruiting a potentially high-earning person into her MLM and paying attention while she learns that she has cancer. But to her skewed perception in the moment, while in the thick of the MLM, this feels perfectly normal to her. Thinking only about work at a time when her personal health is at risk, that feels normal. This is one of the most powerful scenes in the book. Emily, in retrospect, knows how ridiculous this is, and it comes out in the snarkiness of her writing, especially in that last line where she knows the inherent paradox. The allure of being able to work from anywhere becomes the burden of being required to be on call 24/7. We get a clear glimpse into Emily's mindset at the time of how indoctrinated she really is, how all in she had to be thinking at the time. But believe it or not, the story only gets more wild. On page 135, Emily's upline, Becky, encourages her to actually use her cancer story as a marketing tactic to sell more shitty skincare products. As the book says, "You know," Becky continues, "this could be really good for your business." What? How so? I'm trying to figure out how cancer surgery or a little downtime for phone calls could be good for anything. Remember last year when that one lady's husband died? What was her name? Jessa, lives in Louisiana. I vaguely remember, although I don't know Jessa, everyone in Rejuvenate sent their love and posted about her. I mean, her business blew up after, Becky continues. So many people purchased out of sympathy, and not just for her. Tons of people in the company were able to capitalize on it. Sympathy? Capitalize? Yikes, my initial feeling is cringe. It feels a little exploitative, maybe? I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, but Becky hasn't led me astray yet, and I do remember how much love and support surrounded Jessa. It couldn't hurt, right? Wow! Just imagine your friend tells you that they have cancer. Who here would respond with, well, let's find a way to market that. Let's find a way to profit off of that. Only in America, where cancer is going to put you out $100,000 in hospital bills anyway, does it make sense to try to ever profit off of having cancer. Insane. I love that Emily is open about this story, and I love that we as the readers get to see just how fucked up the MLM culture was, that this type of behavior was normal. It was so normalized that in this moment, Emily's reaction is to entertain Becky's idea rather than just yelling fuck off and storming away. So eventually, Emily does use her cancer diagnosis for marketing, and remember how when she was waiting at the doctor's office, she was trying to recruit Madison, the semi-famous hairstylist, into her downline? Well, Emily's able to slide into Madison's DMs with her cancer story, and Madison is so moved by it that she does sign up under Emily. Emily ends up going through her treatments for cancer and recovering, thankfully without too many additional complications. All is going well for Emily. What sucks for me as the reader is that now that we're past that story, we're back at it with the misogyny in the writing. Let's go to page 166. Emily is at a big convention for Rodon and Fields, or Rejuvenate as she calls it, and Madison the hairstylist is hanging out with her and other members of the team. Page 166, she says, Madison was bragging to Brianna and Christine that she's about to hit premiere star. I sip my champagne and congratulate her. The bonus of having someone on your team who's a rock star is the ability to claim some of their success. Not their failures, though. Those are their fault. I remember when I hit premiere star, I offer again, demonstrating how we've been trained to turn friendly competition into jealousy. My next few months are going to be big, I tell the other ladies. I'm up for Excellence Circle. Now that one will be hard to get, Christine says, countering me wide-eyed. Madison is clearly annoyed that I took the spotlight off of her. There's a common theme of Emily hating Madison for no reason in this book, and it's never really explored why. The idea is that Emily was initially excited to recruit Madison into her downline because Madison has a lot of followers, and Madison could then recruit a lot of other people, which means more profit for all of them. Except for the people Madison recruits, they're fucked. But anyway, Emily soon learns that she and Madison don't actually have much in common and don't enjoy spending time together.
Oh my god, she's so annoying.
That's fine, not everyone's gonna be friends. But I don't get why throughout this book, she shit talks Madison as if their personality clashes are all Madison's fault, even though nowhere in the book does she ever detail Madison ever once doing anything wrong. Like on page 160, she says, Madison is high maintenance and high producing. She recruited almost her entire salon full of hairstylists within the first couple months. My sales volume has tripled and my paycheck is over $10,000 per month, and I'm now qualifying for my car because of her. But let me tell you, I work for it. She texts or calls me multiple times a day and expects me to be at her beck and call. Last week she couldn't get a hold of me in a 30-minute period, so she tagged me on Facebook and asked, where are you? So I get that Emily is annoyed because Madison is demanding too much of her time, but isn't Emily also constantly DMing people all the time since the MLM encourages her to do that? And Madison recruited all these people just like Emily wanted, but now she's characterized as high maintenance, which in my experience is a dog whistle used pretty much only as a misogynistic critique against women, and she's high maintenance just because she calls her too much. Didn't Emily as the upline promise to be there as a mentor and coach her, and now she's mad that Madison's actually expecting her to respond? Anyway, it happens again later. On page 162, she says, I don't like Madison. She drives me up the wall. We have nothing in common. Our personalities clash. I find her snobby. She complains constantly, and she's not someone I would be friends with had we not connected through Rejuvenate. But why? In literally 0 scenes has Emily actually shown us Madison doing anything rude or snobby. She just doesn't like her for some reason. And now we're on page 166. We have Emily pretending to read Madison's mind and claims that she knows what Madison is feeling feeling in a conversation that she gives no indication of such feelings. It says, Madison is clearly annoyed that I took the spotlight off of her. Clearly annoyed how? Did she make a weird facial expression? Did she whine, roll her eyes? Did she try to steer the conversation back to herself? Nowhere does Emily give us a single example of Madison indicating that she's annoyed in any way, let alone annoyed solely because they tried to take the spotlight off of her. Emily just says that she is clearly annoyed without giving me as the reader any way to visualize that, and I'm just supposed to take her word that Madison is doing some unknown action that indicates annoyance. Now, as I've said, one of the really beautiful things in this book is that Emily is morally gray and recognizes that about herself. She often characterizes the bad things she thought in the past within the context of what she knows now, which is a fantastic memoir technique. But she doesn't do that here. If she were to rewrite this, she can maybe throw in an italicized thought like, is Madison going to feel angry that I took the spotlight off of her? And then realize maybe that was a rude thing to presume. Or maybe she could describe some gesture like, Madison flinches in her seat and looks away from me. Is she annoyed that I took the spotlight off of her? That way of writing would show that Emily is recalling how she felt in the moment, with the caveat that she now has new context to re-examine that from her distance position as a writer. Instead, by claiming it as a declarative fact on the page that Madison just is clearly annoyed, it sounds like Emily still to this day believes that. So once again, Madison is the villain. Why? Because of fake motivations that Emily made up in her head? Now, page 181 has the worst example of misogyny in the entire book. I don't think Emily even realizes how sexist it is what she wrote here. On page 181, MLM reps are talking about the concept of retiring your husband, which I know makes it sound like you're gonna take him out back and shoot him, so trust me, I don't like the verbiage they use there either. A lot of MLMs have this concept of retire your spouse. Basically, this just means that one day you as a boss babe will make enough money to support your entire family without your spouse's income because this business opportunity is so lucrative. At the end of the day, it's really just another cult tactic meant to isolate you, because if your spouse stops working and you quit any other job you have and you both go all in on the MLM, now your entire family's survival is dependent on your commitment to the company. This is why Amway couples end up going into tons of debt to keep their standing, because both spouses are committed to the company, neither work another job outside the company, and both are losing money and taking out loans while funneling more and more money into the company's CEO. I completely agree. This is a topic we need to discuss, and we need to talk about why it's such an awful thing for companies to ask of you. But that's not really the direction this conversation goes. Now, to be fair, one page later on page 182, Emily does briefly discuss this concept. She says, the truth is, if you retire your spouse, that means you are now the sole financial provider in your home, reliant entirely on Rejuvenate to cover your mortgage, your kids' school, and your own retirement. You are more dependent on the network, the support, and the money, making you less likely to leave. I agree. That's a really important thing to point out. I think Emily should have expanded on that concept and made it take up the entire section about retiring your spouse, but that's not what we get. Leading into this page on page 181, this is what we get. So we're at the MLM convention and we just learned that Becky, Emily's upline, is planning to retire her husband. Becky's husband is going to quit his job and the two of them are going to rely solely on the MLM for their family's livelihood. Emily and another one of her friends in the MLM, Serena, discuss this. It says, she leans over and shakes her head. Seriously, Emily, do me a favor and just kill me if I ever utter the words retiring my husband. It's so cringy. What is he, a fucking racehorse? She grabs a chocolate-covered mini donut and asks, how do you bang a guy who's mooching off of you? I erupt in laughter because it's funny, and she's right. I'm sorry, but she's right? Let's contextualize this. In the context of the scene we're currently in, the women at this convention truly believe that the MLM is going to earn them tons of money, enough to sustain an entire family. We know that's not true, but we have to keep in mind that in Emily's mind at the time, she thinks it's true. Emily, in both her naive voice at the time and her current reflective voice as the author writing now, removed from the situation, both of those voices are declaring Serena as right when she says the sentence, how do you bang a guy who's mooching off of you? What we're supposed to gather from this is that men aren't sexy unless they make money? Isn't this the stereotype that red pill assholes accuse women of being all the time? Now here they are in this book perpetuating it. What do you mean she's right? Let's look at the language used here. He's mooching? In this scenario, how is the man mooching? He's just no longer the financial provider. Would you say that stay-at-home moms or housewives are mooching off of their husbands? No, of course you wouldn't, because that's ridiculous. In fact, so much of this book has been about the validity of unpaid labor that falls on many women. So why is that labor no longer valid when it falls on men? In my idealistic naivety, I'd assume that if one partner is making enough that the other partner can just leave their job, then that partner would probably take on the majority of childcare duties instead. Emily, who's been a stay-at-home mom for a few years before getting sucked into the MLM should know this, since at the time her husband made enough for the family to live on, so she didn't go to work. Just reverse it now. Does this mean that she was mooching off of him at the time? No, absolutely not. This statement is sexist in both ways. It's sexist against men because it assumes that a stay-at-home husband would automatically be a lazy moocher instead of, you know, an attentive father or an effective homemaker. But it's also sexist against women because the statement itself relies on the devaluation of the labor that Emily herself was doing before joining the MLM. The very fact that the statement can't successfully reverse the gender shows that there's sexist bias at play. And if this were simply an observation about gender stereotypes, that would be one thing. But no, Emily says she's right and she means it. There's never any further reflection later on. Within the context of the book, the statement she's right is supposed to be Emily's moment of clarity, a hint at a belief she still holds today. So we've learned that Emily and Serena are incapable of being attracted to stay-at-home dads, which I'm not here to kink shame. If you're money sexual, that's on you. But I know that I personally as a woman would feel nothing but fulfilled if I could financially provide for my entire household. To be fair, I don't have kids, so I can't speak to that piece of the puzzle, but I can imagine a future where I eventually make enough money from a combination of my YouTube content, writing and publishing my books, selling merch, and selling my stuffed animals and toys, that eventually I can provide for both me and Tyler fully. And if I could make enough money that Tyler could leave his corporate job, and in leaving that job he would be happy and fulfilled working on DIY home improvement projects, maintaining our house, helping me out with my business and all of that, I'd find that sexy as hell. I don't derive sexual fulfillment from men's income. I'd get a sense of pride and emotional fulfillment financially from providing for my family, and it's weird to me that it's not acknowledged that women can achieve that or can gain emotional fulfillment from it. Like, that's pure gold digger shit. That's like red pill fodder right there. Even on page 182, in the passage I read earlier, the one I kind of liked, Emily does kind of double down on the sexist dog whistles. Remember, she said, if you retire your spouse, that means you are now the sole financial provider in your home, reliant entirely on Rejuvenate to cover your mortgage, your kids' school, and your own retirement. First of all, I think it's weird that it said your kids' school as an expense rather than like your kids' food and clothing, because all parents need to buy their kids food and clothing, but most kids go to public school that parents don't have to pay for, so it sounds like an assumption that all kids are going to private school, but maybe I'm reading too much into that, don't worry about that. Beyond that, the discussion just lacks all nuance. Yes, being reliant on the MLM is the problem, but it frames the idea of being the sole provider in the home as almost strange for a woman. Yes, it's terrifying and culty to become reliant on an MLM for your income and your family's livelihood, but everything operates under the assumption that being the sole provider in a home wasn't a regular occurrence before this. You are now the sole provider, as if there's no way a woman could have already been the sole provider before. This also ignores the fact that many households aren't just a man who makes money and a woman who gets roped into an MLM. Many low-income women, especially low-income women of color, are likely to work multiple jobs already before being roped into the MLM. And due to the over-policing of low-income neighborhoods, especially those with predominantly black residents, many non-wealthy and non-white women become single mothers due to the disproportionate likelihood of poor and non-white men to go to prison, even for the same crimes committed by wealthy white men due to racial prejudice within the judicial system. And yes, these women do get roped into MLMs as well. Look at the ways that Herbalife has specifically targeted Latino communities in the US, especially immigrant communities. At entrepreneurship conventions I've gone to, the overwhelming majority of paparazzi jewelry distributors I've met have been black women. It's odd. In this book's attempt to critique white supremacy and patriarchal structures, the book ends up upholding them through treating Emily's experience as an upper middle class white woman, a former stay-at-home mom, as the default. For so many families, this is not the default. But sections like this, where we laugh off the idea of a woman providing for the family as if it makes a man less attractive to be the one staying at home, where we act as if a retired husband is a woman's first rodeo as the sole provider, this book is writing off the expenses of many poor women, many women of color, and just women who have already been the financial providers of their household for a long time. The book claims that it wants to question these systems of power in place, but in the places where it makes the most sense to question them, Emily holds back. She retreats back into the comfort of the gender role she already knows, the one she assumes that we as the reader must already know too. That's never been my experience, nor has it been the experience of most women I know. Which again is why I wish this book had more testimonials of various other reps from the other MLMs, like the quotes at the beginning of the chapters woven in throughout, because Emily's story on its own is so narrow. Anyway, my dream life is to financially provide for a cute house husband or housewife, and men aren't any less attractive to me when they're not making money. When I proposed to Tyler, he was literally unemployed, and I was literally working the worst job of my life, my only corporate job, where I had a salary and benefits. So money isn't what makes me want to bang a man, okay, Emily? Moving on. The book then goes into detail about Emily's journey with alcoholism and her eventual path to sobriety. Honestly, I thought the way she told the story was really well done. Throughout the book, she shows how addiction starts off small and then continues to grow and grow, starting with scenes of her MLM team always meeting at bars, people getting drunk at company events and conventions, and then her reliance on alcohol growing more and more until she reaches her breaking point. Emily's rock bottom comes in the form of a really chilling scene about halfway through the book. In this scene, she's about to get the coveted white Mercedes, or maybe it's a white Cadillac. I know Mary Kay has the pink Cadillac. Anyway, you know how a lot of those MLMs have a company car? This is what they call it, but really it's another scam. It's a car that they lease in your name, and then if you drop below a certain quota of the company sales, or you drop below buying your own personal product purchases in a high enough amount, then they're going to stop paying your car payments and you're on the hook for the lease. Still, the way the MLM leaders present the car to their reps as if it's a huge status symbol. You drive the company car, the free car that you earned. It means you've made it. You're officially a big deal. So Emily finally gets her car, and her upline tells her that she needs to throw a party to celebrate getting the car. Emily finds this a little weird, which is reasonable, but the people above her in the MLM basically tell her that she needs to have a gorgeous party with all the reps there, something well decorated that she can post on social media, because then she can show off the lifestyle, which will incentivize other reps to push the products harder and hopefully inspire others to join the community. So Emily hosts this massive party, and while she's there, she's just drinking champagne with everyone, having some alcohol to celebrate. On the way home, she finally gets to drive her new company car off the lot. And literally, on her first time driving it ever, she gets pulled over and gets issued a DUI because she didn't realize how much drinking she'd been doing at the party. This is Emily's big wake-up call, and she realizes that she needs to get sober. I admire the hell out of this. I've known a lot of people in my life who have struggled with addiction. It is not an easy hurdle to overcome. So I give massive props to anyone who recognizes they have a problem, understands the severity of that problem, and works hard to get treatment. I just want to say here that I am really proud of Emily for getting sober. Once Emily gets sober, the way the others in the MLM company treat it is horrifying. It's the same as it was during her cancer diagnosis. They're like, let's turn it into a marketing opportunity. On page 193, she says, "Before I stopped drinking, I was worried my sales would fall off if I quit, but since getting sober, they're only improving. Word started to get around that I quit drinking, and corporate became interested in my story. Cautionary tale meets inspiring reversal meets cold hard cash. It's the stuff of MLM lore. And since I am now a top leader in the company, they want me to tell the tale. My regional manager, Seth, reaches out, encouraging me to share my inspiring journey with others. Not long after, I'm asked to speak at convention. This is only 6 months after I got my DUI in my brand new free car. Now here I am, being asked to go on stage in front of thousands and spill the tea. MLMs tend to be value agnostic in this way, using any opportunity to spin someone's sob story to their advantage, even if the MLM culture is directly related to the dopamine hits and addictive behavior. I was on top at Rejuvenate, and apparently my greatest heartbreak was its greatest success story." That whole section, and honestly the page as a whole, is just chilling. I love how she closed off the scene with that line, "My greatest heartbreak was its greatest success story." Just wow. This is the kind of story that really reminded me why I was really loving this book so much in some parts. Emily, as a morally gray protagonist, is showing us how MLMs not only do the worst things to us, but also bring out the worst in us and then encourage us to bring out the worst in each other. Continuing with the positives, the book then leads into some excellent factual breakdowns of how the money flows within MLMs, and then dives into some legal history as to how MLMs are able to get away with as much as they do. On page 204, she says, "How has the MLM industry avoided regulation so well up until this point? The FTC has a franchise rule that was passed in the 1970s. If you're going to buy a franchise, Dunkin' Donuts, Burger King, Subway, you need to sign a disclosure statement from the company with everything you need to know well before you invest any money. However, this regulation doesn't apply unless the required payments in the first 6 months are over $500. This is how MLMs are being scrutinized. Under the franchise rule, if you look at MLMs, there's always a buy-in business kit that is less than $500. Sure, there are many that cost more, but as long as they can offer a buy-in with their product portfolio that is less than $500, they can skirt the regulation." Now, this type of research was excellent. I loved seeing this research and the history woven in with Emily's story itself. Overall, this chapter called Elbow, Elbow, Wrist, Wrist is probably my favorite one overall in the book. If you're going to read one chapter in the book, you better read this one, because it is jam-packed with heartbreaking, beautifully written personal stories, as well as comprehensive education about the topic, all beautifully woven together. I was also excited to see on page 243, Emily giving a transparent mathematical breakdown of her financials. I'll pop it up on the screen so you can see it. This is what we need more former MLM reps to do. Give us the details. Break down the money like this. Show people mathematically on paper how the MLM doesn't work. Even for people like Emily that the company sort of works for, meaning she made a lot more money than she lost, the company still doesn't really work. The more people willing to share breakdowns this specific, the better. Unfortunately, just 2 chapters later, Emily gets really sus again. This chapter is called "You Can Check Out, But You Can Never Leave," and honestly, I wish I got to ask Emily a different question on a podcast, because I'd like to ask her how her publisher licensed a lyric from Hotel California. Putting song lyrics in books is a whole hot mess that I had to avoid like the plague when I was doing my 3rd round of edits for One Final Vinyl, but that's beside the point. I like the chapter title. I thought it was fitting. It was a cool reference. So at the beginning of the chapter, we dive right into the fact that Emily is now considering leaving the MLM at the beginning of 2020, especially now that she has an entirely separate coaching business that's going well. And I'm over here like, whoa, slow down, you have a coaching business? Earlier Earlier in the book, when Emily gets sober, she talks about how one of her goals is now to help other moms get sober, which is great. I think that's a much better personal mission statement than selling for an MLM. It definitely has a much better impact on the world at large. She briefly mentions that she's doing a program to get certified as a sobriety coach. I'm not sure what that means. The book never details what kind of program she did, what kind of accreditation she has, anything. I even went to her business's website. The business is called Sober Mom Squad, and I couldn't find anywhere on the website where she got certified or what specific certification she holds. It mentions she's certified, but in what? Anyway, it's entirely possible that Emily has excellent credentials and I just didn't find them. Her coaching business is doing well. Okay, how? Where did you find your clients? Because it kind of sounds like you got them from the MLM or from the followers you gained by being a top MLM seller, which in and of itself isn't a crime. Those people might need help getting sober too. Then why shouldn't she help them? Why not turn your negative MLM experience into something positive? But at the same time, we don't know anything about Emily's certification. What we do know is that she still is in the MLM at this time. She hasn't left yet. Instead, she's now making money off of people buying her shitty skincare and people paying her to coach them into being sober. Whatever that means. Again, I don't have any proof that this is exploitative, but within the context of the book, Emily doesn't do a whole lot of writing to show us that it's not. As someone who spent so much time in an MLM, Emily should know just how predatory MLM adjacent coaching influencers and companies can be, and how many scammy certifications are out there. And I'm not saying that she scammed anyone. I'm saying that she's targeted this book at readers who are critical of the entire system, readers who are skeptical of all of this by nature, so it would behoove her to show a clear contrast of this from her MLM in her writing. On page 270, we once again lack reflection, which makes this book confusing. In this section, Emily's talking about how she saw a lot of MLM reps making false health claims about their products at the height of COVID back in early 2020. And this was absolutely true. I even made a few videos on this back in 2020. It was disgusting what these people were trying to get away with. I agree with Emily that this is harmful, but the way she phrases it honestly confuses me. She says, "Now I don't knock anecdotes or natural remedies, but I'm also a trained chemist and have significant experience in research, studying sources, and vetting where data comes from." Earlier in the book, Emily also talks about how she used to work as a chemist before she left her job to stay home and raise her 5 kids. So my question is, if Emily was lonely and craving a job and community, why didn't she seek out a work from home job in chemistry? And maybe she did. Maybe she couldn't find one. That could have led to an interesting discussion on the ways that resume gaps, which disproportionately affect women who take time off to have kids, can negatively affect your chances of getting hired later on, and that could serve as another commentary of how capitalism feeds into patriarchy. But if she just didn't want that kind of job again, that's also fine too. I'm not here to judge her life choices or her career path. That is up to her. But what I also wonder is, if she cares a lot about chemistry and vetting sources and data, why don't we ever get an exploration in the book of how she justifies the MLM to herself against her own logic and research skills? She worked for Rodon and Fields. Was there ever a point where she sat down with someone else in the MLM to discuss the ingredients in the skincare products, the chemical makeup of those products, and whether their claims were true? Was there ever a time that she, as someone who has significant experience in studying sources and vetting the data where it comes from, as she said, questioned the structure of the company out loud before joining? If she chose not to run the numbers ahead of time and intentionally turned a blind eye to the flaws that were there, why did she do that? What was her justification to herself? Was it because she was so desperate for a sense of community that she was willing to do something she knew was logically impossible? Did she study the data and make the choices to follow her heart instead against her better judgment? How did she navigate those emotions? I'm not saying Emily did anything wrong here. Again, she's both a victim and a perpetrator. But I want to know more about her thought process here. This is her memoir, or her half memoir, half narrative journalism piece against MLMs. It would be so brilliant to see just how an MLM was able to manipulate a trained chemist with specific research and data analysis experience into joining their cult. It would be a true testament as to how literally everyone is susceptible because their tactics are so sinister. So why don't we get that? Then once again, on page 283, we get a lot of speculation once again about Madison. We're back to shit-talking Madison. Madison, the hairstylist, is being shit-talked again with no tangible details to back it up. Basically, it's talking about how Madison got terminated from the MLM because other consultants took screenshots of the DMs she had with them where she said out-of-context things that could have been misconstrued about the company, and those other reps sent those DMs into leadership and then they fired her. About this situation, Emily says, "The truth? She got terminated because she always had a target on her back. She was young and gorgeous and escalated quickly, and the consultants are jealous and think she has it too easy. They were looking for any way to take her down and they found one by reporting her deviant behavior to their superiors." I'm sure the MLM was extremely culty, and I'm sure there were people cutthroat enough to behave this way. But in all our vague talk about Madison, I haven't seen a single piece of evidence for this. I'm not saying that Emily's lying, maybe it's true. I'm saying that we as the readers in the book never get to see this happen. We never see any examples of people shit-talking Madison behind her back, or any passive-aggressive remarks steeped in jealousy about how easy Madison has had it. And Emily must have seen or heard about these things happening if she's confident enough to write that it happened in a published book. So give us an example. Otherwise, it sounds like you're once again just making up everything that happens surrounding Madison. Also, I'd actually like to apologize to Emily real quick. Gonna girl start apologizing here, because she actually does talk about racism for real one other time in the book. It's on page 289 when she talks about how the KKK was originally structured as a pyramid scheme. That was a super interesting fact to learn, and it was the first real example of how pyramid schemes profit off of racism that was actually used in the book. And in this case, it was very literal. So I appreciate a lot that she told that story. Page 309, though, I just kind of found offensive as hell. We're back at it with the misogyny. Here's what she says on page 309. This is after she leaves the MLM. I start shedding pieces of the Boss Babe uniform I acquired over the years. I say goodbye to my hair extensions and even stop covering my grays altogether. Part of it is facilitated by the pandemic and hair salons being closed, but I also feel like I'm discovering myself again, the same way I did when the alcohol was stripped away. I quit working so hard to remain a size 2 because that's what looked good on stage and in life-size photos at convention. I start moving my body in ways I enjoy instead of ways that make me thinner. I even have my breast implants removed because they feel so, for lack of a better word, fake. So, quick disclaimer, I agree that it's wrong for others to pressure Emily to look a certain way. If she didn't want to dye her hair and she didn't want breast implants and she didn't want to be thin and all of that, she shouldn't have to. And uplines in the MLM putting pressure on her to look that way for a company cultivated image is wrong. Full stop. It is abusive. Full stop. But I don't like that she calls these things fake. For some women, these things are very, very real. I'm not a natural blonde, for example. This hair is bleached to shit. If someone asked me if my hair is natural, though, I would say yes, because these curls grow this way naturally out of my head. This is not chemically treated or permed. My hair is going gray early though. I bleach it. I might dye it red next month, and I'm going to continue to because personally I like it. Now, second question, did the MLM pressure Emily to get breast implants? If so, what the fuck? And if so, also, why is this the first we're hearing about it? She puts breast implants in the category of shedding the Boss Babe uniform, so did she get them to impress the MLM, or did she already have them before? Because if she got them for the MLM and that's never addressed in the book, that is an insane missed opportunity right there. You can't just drop in there that you literally got plastic surgery for your MLM company without any explanation of that. That would be up there with like the exploitation of her cancer story and her sobriety story. The other option is that Emily already had the breast implants but just chose to remove them because she was already in a state of changing up her look at the time. In that case, again, good for her. As you guys know, I'm a champion of bodily autonomy 100% of the time, but also I don't like that she's calling them fake. The conservatives keep asking us, what is a woman? But I ask you, dear audience, what is a boob? Is it a mass of fatty tissue? Does it need to have milk ducts? Does a man with gynecomastia have boobs? Does a man who's obese have boobs? Does a woman whose chest is naturally flatter than most men still have boobs? What is a boob? The answer, like the answer to what is a woman, is that everything exists within context and the meaning changes based on the sentence. So what exactly does Emily mean here when she calls her breast implants fake? If she personally doesn't like them and wants them gone, that's great. Power to her. She should make those decisions for her personal body. But the context of this paragraph is that Emily felt fake as a boss babe. She felt like she was making fake friends, working for a fake company, selling products that were no more than a facade for the pyramid scheme behind them. And her transformation back to her natural state is meant to symbolize the discarding of all things fake. So the idea here is that the breast implants aren't real. They're not real boobs, and I have an issue with that. Would you say that to a trans woman who got breast implants? Would you call her boobs fake? What about a cis woman who gets a boob job because that's what finally gives her the body image she's wanted all along? A few months ago, I had a talk with a fellow anti-MLM creator, Brianna Jewell, on her channel about this topic because she and I have both had boob jobs in the opposite direction. She got implants and I got a reduction, and I wouldn't call either of our chests fake. That's the realest version of who we really are. A very flat-chested cis woman may experience body dysphoria, not dysmorphia, but dysphoria, and similar to what a trans woman could feel, and both of these women would feel like the most real version of themselves is the version with breast implants. Again, I want to be clear that Emily is free to feel more like herself without breast implants. That is the realest version of her, and that is great. The problem is that hair dye, implants, extensions, and all of these things are treated as symbols of discarding a fake identity for a real one, and that causes the reader to parallel these things with an act of deception. And that creates a negative connotation for those who want those things for their own valid personal reasons. Again, self-reclamation is important. Reclaiming your body after trauma is important, and I'm glad that Emily got the chance to reclaim her body in a way that works best for her. I just really wish that this had been framed as a discussion of body reclamation instead of a discussion about what's real versus what's fake. Then, after we have a whole discussion about how Emily is a real woman now and is no longer fake because her hair color and boobs are are real, whatever that means, we get hit with some weirdly MLM adjacent rhetoric in a chapter-long sales pitch for her Sober Mom Squad coaching services. On page 313, she says, "Though we formed it during the pandemic, we realize all the ways it can create purpose for sober moms who long to find joy in the quiet and the chaos and away from the pomp and inauthenticity of social media. We want to create a place of action, activism, and unity, and not just for white women. We want Sober Mom Squad to reflect women from all over the ethnic, racial, and economic spectrum. Though most of my network is still very white, thanks to my MLM, and Sober Mom Squad still reflects that, I've learned from the lack of diversity and rejuvenated have taken part in anti-racism training. I have included BIPOC women among the company's leadership because I wanted to feel like home for anyone who wishes to leave alcohol behind. In many ways, Sober Mom Squad came out of the realization that women need the fellowship that MLMs provide, but perhaps without all the predatory behavior." First, we get a confirmation that she did find her squad and her clients through the following she built in her MLM. Otherwise, why would she phrase it as "it's very white thanks to my MLM"? Next, guys, that sounded sales pitchy, right? Like, that's not just me. That's just a direct comparison to MLM, but how this time it's gonna be real empowerment. It's gonna be different this time, guys. I also noticed that she said she wants the squad to reflect women from across the ethnic, racial, and economic spectrum. And that's great. I think it should. But when I went to the website, I saw another thing. Emily's been thinking about another spectrum as well, the autism spectrum. On the website, Sober Mom Squad advertises specific groups for moms of neurodivergent kids. However, I noticed there is no special group or resource or even acknowledgement of neurodivergent moms themselves. That's extremely weird, right? Addiction is so incredibly linked to mental health in the ways that our brains work. The ways that addiction might affect someone with ADHD or OCD or autism might look very different from the way that addiction affects a neurotypical person. And look, I know I'm not the main character of the world. The group isn't even for me. I'm not sober and I'm not a mom. But I just think it's weird that she's emphasizing inclusivity, but the website's disability inclusivity only stretches to moms who need help getting sober while parenting kids with those disabilities, not the moms who have them themselves. It feels like yet another example of people forgetting all about autistic adults and focusing their resources on the parents of autistic children. It's hard not to drink when your kid's autistic, right, Karen? Anyway, the sales pitch continues on this page. "I make sure to offer a sliding scale. Those who can afford to pay for the services allow me to be able to pay my coaches and counselors a very fair rate and to offer scholarships to those who can't afford it. It's a payment structure I feel good about because it rewards those who are well trained to help people sustain change in their lives, allowing people to value our work to invest in benefiting everyone who's involved." That sounds like website copy. If this belongs in the book itself, it should have been woven into the stories. It should have been in the narrative itself. Why don't we talk about an example of Emily while she's still in the MLM company, realizing that women around her were getting bankrupted and thinking about how if she ever started a company of her own, she'd do it different. She'd use a sliding scale. Or a scene of her at the doctor's office pondering the state of American healthcare and then deciding to run her own company differently. Why is this dropped in here like she's trying to sell us, the readers, on the Sober Mom Squad? On page 314, she says, "The connection I have with my friends in Sober Mom Squad is built on a desire to see each other improve, but only in the ways that make sense for us individually. We don't have a checklist of requirements, and though many pay for the service, nobody is treated differently if they receive our free services or use our other recovery paths or programs. We establish real connections to combat the loneliness that leads us to drink or seek out other unhealthy coping mechanisms. We share and we talk about the hard shit, we create community and lonely pockets of motherhood. We don't shy away from the hard topics, and we nod our heads in solidarity." Okay, what's weird is that in this book, Emily calls out Rachel Hollis twice by name as an example of someone who's a scammer, a manipulator, someone she doesn't want to be like, and I don't blame her. I said the same thing in my book, Savvy Business Owner, but my point is, this sounds exactly like the kind of shit I hear Rachel say. We talk about the hard shit, we deal with the tough stuff, we seek out real connections, we create community. This is the exact same rhetoric we saw in Rachel's Made for More documentary. And there's nothing wrong with that in a vacuum. These are nice sentiments after all, but that's all they are, sentiments. Empty platitudes. We haven't yet seen an example of a why or a how. And again, one of this book's strengths all along has been its ability to weave together fact and narrative. But here, we've dropped all of that in favor of just PR speak. Why not show us a scene? Why not tell us about your progress of developing the company or talking to a friend or brainstorming ideas of what you want to implement in your own business that might be different from an MLM? Why just give us an empty, vapid overview of a company that we can look up online when you could be telling us the why, the how, the where, and the when? At the end of the day, that's why this book left me feeling so mixed, because it ends with a sales pitch for her new business, her new coaching company, which is totally gonna be different this time, guys! To be clear, like I said, MLMs can target anyone, and those who leave MLMs and do the good work to break down why they're so awful absolutely deserve our praise, our recognition, and our encouragement to continue. I'm very proud of Emily for speaking out and for writing a book with so much fantastic research on MLMs and why they suck. But why did she have to end the book like this? I ended up giving this book 3 stars. Despite my criticisms, I do highly recommend that you read it. Emily presents a lot of really solid facts throughout this book, especially regarding the lies that MLMs will sell you about income disclosure statements, the logical fallacies involved in comparing MLMs to small businesses or franchises, and the most extreme examples of cruelty that MLMs enact, like getting her to use her cancer diagnosis to sell more products, or turning her sobriety journey into an inspirational marketing tactic, even though the MLM had also enabled her alcoholism in the first place. Those moments have such a strong impact, and they show just how devastating MLM companies can be. And I think it's important that everyone reads those stories and uses them as a piece of their educational arsenal when warning others in their life against MLMs. So I'd recommend that you read this book and also read Ponzi-nomics by Robert Fitzpatrick, because these two books together are what's going to pack the greatest punch. That book has a lot more math data and raw history, and this book takes you through a former rep's personal story and connects with you on the human level. With those two pieces together, I think you can get a really good comprehensive anti-MLM education. However, I am still suspicious of Emily's motives at the end of the day. How did she end up making so much money in Rhode Island Fields? Where did she get her sobriety coach certification? Why was she always assuming the worst possible intention on the part of reps she didn't get along with, like Madison? Why is it unsexy for a man not to make money? It's a little weird to be so heavily critical of this book, but also to encourage you to read it. But hey, books are complicated and nuanced, just like all of us are as people. But you know what's not complicated or morally nuanced? MLM CEOs, people who start up pyramid schemes. Do not get involved with pyramid schemes. Do not support them. Do not join an MLM, friends, and don't let the people you love join one either. With the current 3-star rating I left on Goodreads, I clearly left this book with a ton of mixed feelings, so I'm also curious about all of your opinions in the comments below. Please let me know how you liked this book, or if you agreed or disagreed with my review. I'm excited to hear what you all think. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I'll see you again next week for more videos, but in the meantime, don't forget to support small businesses and not MLM companies. Bye, friends!
Get you some nuts.
Yeah, you effin'.
Up yours, woke moralist. We'll see who cancels who.